Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Monica Gu and I upload swimsuit and lifestyle content on this channel. In today's video, I'm going to teach you the easiest way to draft a corset. So if this is your vibe, let's get right into this tutorial together. So these are the measurements needed for the corset. So the first thing first is to rule out your borderline like this. This borderline will just start as your starting line. And my shoulder is 15 divided by 2. That will give me 7.5. So I'm just going to mark out 7.5 here. So from this point here, I'm going to mark out ½ inch for my shoulder slope. Can you see it? So before I do that, I'm going to mark out a basic neckline. It's not needed for this pattern, but I just need to do it. So I'll just mark out 3 by 3. So I'm going to take my curve ruler to curve it out like this. Please note that this part is not needed for the corset. I just have to draft a basic bodice pattern before drafting my corset. That is why it is important for you to know how to draft a basic bodice pattern. If you don't know how to draft a basic bodice pattern, I have a video on how to do that. I will leave it in the description box below so you can check it out. So the next thing I'm going to do is to take my ruler like this and slant it. So this is going to serve as my shoulder slope. Okay. Next thing you want to do is to mark out your arm round. And for me, my measurement, my arm round is 8.5. I'm also going to mark out my bust point. My bust point is 10 inches. I'm going to mark out my under bust. My under bust is 14 inches. Then I'm going to mark out my waistline. My half waistline is 16 inches. Then for the length of the corset, I'm just going to add extra 2 inches allowance. I'll just make use of 19 inches. So the next thing I'm going to do is just to rule out the line like this. So to mark my armhole, remember I measured out 8.5 inches. So I'm going to make sure that this part is 7.5 inches, like the way we marked it here. So it's accurate like this. So I'm going to connect the points like this together. So from this point, I'll just extend the line like this. So this is my armhole round. This is my bust point. This is my under bust. This is my waistline, and this is my top length. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark out my nipple to nipple measurement. So my nipple to nipple measurement is 8 inches. So I'm just going to divide it by 2. That will give me 4 inches. So I'm just going to mark it out like this. So I'm going to connect the lines like this together. So for my cleavage depth, I want it to be 8.5. So I'm just going to mark out 8.5 here. So on this point like this, I will just mark out ½ inch like this. Then I'm going to connect the line this way. So to mark out your armhole round, the next thing you want to do is to mark whatever you have here. This is 8.5. Then I'm going to divide it by 2. And whatever it gives me, I'm going to mark it out like this. Then I'll come down by 0.75 inches. So I'm going to place my curve ruler this way, like this. I'll just make sure it is well seated properly. Then I'll follow the curve and curve it out like this. So from my shoulder to where our corset copy always stays, you know that part that looks like where your breast is basically. So for me, I'll be using 6.5. If you want your boobs to show very well, you can use 7 inches or 8, depends on you. but for me I'll make use of 6.5. So I've already marked it here like this, 6.5. So I'm just going to connect the line like this. So on this point here, I am going to mark out my nipple to nipple measurement so I can connect these points together. So I'm still going to mark out my 4 inches, which is my nipple to nipple measurement. So I'm going to connect it like this. On my waistline and my top length, I'm going to come up by 1 inch like this. 1 inch, 1 inch. You do the same thing on the waistline too. 1 inch, 1 inch. Then you take your ruler and you connect the point like this. So I'm also going to extend this 1 inch to this under bust line like this. Then I'm going to connect it this way. So you should have something like this. Take my curve ruler like this. Then I'm going to curve it out this way. Just look at me carefully. So I'm going to see the way I position my ruler. Then you do the same thing for this side too. Just make sure it is curvy and it touches this line like this. I'm also going to do the same thing for the second side. I'll place my ruler this way and I'll connect the points like this. Then I'll also place it like this so it can touch this point. It has to be curvy. So this is what I got. Remember the cleavage depth that we marked, the 8.5, then I came up by ½ inch. Because by the time I open it on fold, it will give me 1 inch. You can see. So I'm going to place my ruler like this. Can you see? See? From this point, I'm going to connect it to this point with my curve ruler. It has to be curvy and neat. So this is what I got. Next thing I'm going to do is to take your curve ruler like this. And you're going to make sure that it is well seated. So you have to make sure that the curve is well seated on your pattern. So you can see how I placed it like this. So I'm just going to curve it out like this. So for this sharp edge, I'll just use my curve ruler. So I don't want it to be pointy. So now for the other part, next thing we want to do is to mark out our basic body measurement. So on this point here, I'm going to mark out my bust measurement plus the 2 inches. You know, this is 1 inch I took here and 1 inch I took here. Together, it will give me 2 inches. So my bust is 40 divided by 4. That will give me 10 inches. So 10 inches plus these 2 inches here to give me 12 inches. So I'm just going to mark out 12 inches like this. You can see, this is my 12 inches. So I'm going to mark my waistline measurement divided by 4, and I'm going to add extra 2 inches that I took here. This is what I have. So what I'm going to do is to connect this point to this point like this. So you know, I've already added my 2 inches allowance, the ones I took here for the dart. So all I need to do is just to connect the points together like this. So this is what I have. So can you see the armhole? This is the armhole line I created, right? So from this armhole line, I am going to come down by 2.5 inches. Just look at me. From this armhole curve line, can you see it? I'm coming down by 2.5 inches. So I'm going to mark my 2.5 like this. From this point, from this 2.5 inches, I'm going to measure it from this point, this bust point. I don't want you to get confused, please. This is the armhole line. Can you see it? So from this point, I marked 2.5 inches and I marked it here. So this is my bust point, right? So from this my bust point here, I am going to measure what I have here down to the point I marked. And this is what I have. I have 1 inch here. So the next thing I'm going to do is to get the half measurement of this line. So what I have here is 1 inch. 1 divided by 2 is half. So I'm just going to mark out half like this. This is my half. Can you see it? This line already, this bust point is already a dart. Do you understand? So I'm going to place my ruler like this. Can you see it? Can you see how I placed it? From this point here, I'm going to place it this way. Then I'm going to connect the points together like this. So the midpoint that we marked, the ½ inch, I'm going to place my ruler like this. Then I'm going to connect it too. So this is the dart. So to return this dart from this same armhole line, I am going to come up by 1 inch. Please take note, 1 inch. Then on this part too, I'm going to mark out 1 inch like this. So I'm going to take my ruler like this and connect the points together. Please remember, from the armhole, from this armhole line, this is the armhole line, I measured 2.5. So let me do it like this. This arrow line, 2.5. Then I marked my dart. From this 2.5, this is where it stopped. So from this bust point, I just measured what I had, and I had 1 inch. I divided it by 2. That will give me ½ inch. That is why we have ½ inch here. And I connected the darts together. So from this same armhole line, I came down by 1 inch. So this is it, 1 inch. I just marked 1 inch here, 1 inch here, and connected the lines together so it can be equal. So the next thing to do is to find the midpoint of this line. So from this point, I will just measure what I have here. And what I have here is 4 1/4. So I'm just going to divide it by 2 to get the midpoint. And this is what I got. This is what I got. So you're going to place your curve ruler. Curve ruler is very important for this task. Can you see the way I placed it on my pattern paper? I just want it to be curvy. So I'll just take my marker to connect it like this. So from this point, I want to connect it to this point. So I'm just going to place my curvy ruler again. I have to make sure that it is well seated. You want to make sure that your ruler is well seated on your pattern paper. The next thing I'm going to do is just to connect the points like this. Just make sure it is well seated. So now remember that we only took the 2 inches. We only added the 2 inches that we marked here for the dart. So you also have to add your stitching allowance. So you can either do that on your fabric or on your pattern paper. So for my own pattern paper, I'll just mark out my ½ inch, my 1½ inches like this. This is for my allowance, remember. So I'm just going to connect it together. This place is already messy, but I just had to write it to explain to you guys. So I really hope you understand. I'm just going to extend the dart to my allowance so it will be easier for me to cut out. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cut it out before we slash the dart area. The next thing I'm going to do is to slash this dart. So this line, I'm just going to cut it out like this. So after slashing it, I'm going to cover it with this one. This is how I did it. You can see I slashed that one dart. So I'm just going to place it on the second one like this. So you're just going to take your paper tape to join it together. Connect. After joining it with my paper tape, this is what it looks like. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cut it out. So So after cutting it out, this is what you should look like. You should have something like this. This is your cup, and this. I always like to identify mine, because when you want to cut it on your fabric, you have to be careful. So I always identify mine as this place will be up and down. I'll do the same thing for this other cup too, up and down, because by the time you cut it on your fabric, it might be very, very tricky for you to identify it. To draft your back pattern, this particular corset is going to have zip, because it's just a basic corset pattern. It's not like the Victorian corset. It's a simple and a basic one. But if you choose to put your loops or your highlight, it's optional. It's best to you. But for me, since this is a simple basic corset, I'll be making use of a zip. So the first thing I want to do is to draft out my borderline like this. I have to add my zip allowance. So my zip allowance will be 1.5. So I'm just going to mark it out like this. So I'm going to connect the points together. The first thing first is to mark out my shoulders. Which is 7.5, 15 divided by 2. Then I'm going to come down by ½ inch for my shoulder slope. So I'm just going to connect it like this. So from this point, I'm marking out my 8.5 inches for my arm round. Okay, the back is not going to have a bust point. Your back doesn't have breast. You're just going to proceed to your bust point and your waistline. Your waist point and your allowance. Remember, I used 19 for the length for the front, so I'll do the same thing for the back. So the back is not having any under bust. I'm going to come down by 7.5 just to make sure that it is well aligned. You just place your ruler this way and connect the points together like this. So I'm going to extend the line this way. On the bust point and on the waistline and on the top length, I'm just going to mark it out like this. So remember, for the front pattern, I use 6.5 for my corset cup area, because I don't want my boobs to show too much. It is going to show, but not too much, like 7 inches or 8 inches. So I use 6.5. So I'm also going to use 6.5 here, like this. If I connect the points together, I want to mark out my armhole slope. So I'm just going to divide whatever I have, like we did for the front pattern. So I'm going to divide it by 2. Then I'll come down by ½ inch. For the front pattern, we came down by 0.75, but for the back pattern, you're going to come down by ½ inch. So you're going to place your curve ruler like this. See your curve ruler. You can use any curve ruler, but this curve area, make sure it is sitting perfectly like this. Then you just curve it out. So remember, I used 6.5 for the front, so I'll be using the same for the back. So I'm just going to connect it like this. So the next thing I want to do is to mark out my nipple to nipple measurement. So I'm just going to mark out my 4 inches here, So remember, this is the arm round, this is the bust point, this is the waistline, and this is the top length. So as it is like this, I'm just going to connect the points together like this. This is what. So on the waistline, that's where we normally take our darts. So I'm going to come out by ½ inch here and ½ inch here. I'll do the same thing on the top length too, ½ inch, ½ inch. So you see my ruler like this, and I'm just going to slant it this way. Can you see? Then I'm going to connect it like this. Also for this second side too, I'll make sure it's slanted, and I'm going to mark the darts like this. Normally the front waistline is always bigger than the back waistline. So for me, my waistline for the front is 16.5, but for my back it is 14 inches. So I'm just going to mark out 14 inches like this. This process we're doing is to eliminate the zip bulge. Just use a different marker so you can understand better. So I'm just going to mark out the line this way. So before I take the zip bulge, I'll just mark out my body measurement. So you mark out your body measurement. My bust is 40. I'm just going to mark out 40, 10 inches like this. Then I'm going to add extra 1.5 inches for my allowance. So on the waistline, on the top length, whatever I have, I'm going to add this 1 inch that I took here. So for my waist is 38 divided by 4, that will give me 9.5. So plus 1, that will give me 10.5, plus my 1.5 inches allowance, that will give me 11.5. So I'll just mark it out like this, and I'm going to connect the line like this. So for the zip bulge, I'm going to come out by 1 inch. Can you see 1 inch like this? So from this point here, I'm going to slant it to this point. So I'm just going to slant it like this. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cut it. I'm just going to slash it to this point. Just make sure you don't slash it to the end. So after slashing it into two, I'm just going to place it like this. I will put it on top of this, like this. Can you see? Good. So I'm just going to use my paper tape to tape it. Next thing I'm going to do is to mark out the dart very well, because after slashing it, you can see it's not well aligned anymore. So I'm just going to take my ruler this way just to correct it. And like this. Now if you want to fix eyelet or loop on your corset, you are not going to put any zip allowance. So that means you don't need to add extra 1.5 inches allowance before drafting your pattern. Do you understand? I'm going to use a blue marker, a different marker, to do this so you can get it right. That means when you want to do this, you will know that you are not putting any zip bulge. So you're going to mark out 2 inches like this. You mark it out. Please know this is for people that want to put their loop and they are not going to do zip bulge. So you're going to mark out your 2 inches like this. Then you connect it like this together. So this is what you should have. So note that when you want to start, you are not going to even mark out 1.5 inch for your any zip allowance. So that means you'll be starting from this point. Remember, for the front pattern, we did not have any zip allowance. So that is how you're going to do it. You don't need to add any zip allowance if you are putting loop. So when you want to cut your pattern out, this is what you're going to cut. This and this. So this part is going to be the eyelet area. And this will be the zip. Those that want to put their zip, this is what we are following. Disregard this point. But for those that don't want to put their zip allowance, that don't want to use eyelet or loop, this is what you should do. You have to eliminate any zip allowance or any zip bulge. Then you follow this. So when you want to cut it out, you cut it like this. You have part 1, you have part 2. Do you understand? So when you start from this point, you'll be able to like draw the rope very well so you can be snatched. So before I cut it out, please don't forget to extend this line like this and extend it this way. I'm just going to cut it out. So this is what you should have for the back pattern, as you can see. If you like this video, please give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Share this video with your loved ones. Share this video with your fellow fashion designers so they can also learn like you. And turn on your post notification bell so you can know anytime I upload a new video. So let me know in the comment section if you want me to upload the sewing tutorial of this pattern. See you in my next one, guys. Bye, guys.